In this video, I'm going to show you how I grew my queen Anthurium to this size. Can we get a split screen? This was 3 years ago, and I am so thrilled, so happy. Just with, look at her. Look at her, oh my god. So pretty, guys. So I am gonna include some clips from when I first got it, what she looked like, what I did. I know this plant was in LECA originally from the very beginning, and then I switched it into Lucius of Pond just because I heard such great things about growing Anthuriums in pond. And I felt this video was so important because it really showcases how much of a challenge I had growing this plant for like 75% of the time. Like, the clips are not pretty. Seriously, they're not pretty. And I really want to do it with this plant because I don't think there's enough people on social media showing their struggles with the queen Anthurium. The queen Anthurium is a difficult plant, more than others. And so I am so excited to share this journey. I'll say this now, because I get this question all the time when people see the specimen. I do not have a grow tent. I do not have a cabinet, so my humidity stays between 40 to 60%. Right now it's winter, so it's about 40 to 50% on average, saying that you can grow a queen Anthurium big when you don't have greenhouse conditions and also cooler temperatures. Right now it's 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit for the past 2 months. During the summer though, it does go up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So the journey started in June 2020, so 3.5 years ago. Look how small. Look how small. I was so happy that I finally got my hands on one. Like, in 2020, that was like at the top of my wish list. Like, finding these clips to include in this video and pictures, like, I was just so amazed that she's finally like a pretty large specimen. This was at the beginning of my LECA journey, so I did throw her into LECA. Right after getting her, she was in sphagnum moss. I threw her into LECA. She had no issues at all. And so a month and a half later, she did push out this new leaf. And this is the very first leaf grown in my care, and I just was so happy. You know, I did hear at that time that Anthurium roots, they are thirsty, they are larger and tuberous, you know, at the time when you compare to like certain philodendrons, for example, and they always need to be kept a little bit moist. I mean, that's pretty much true for all plants, but more than ever, Anthuriums, they will tell you and they will show you that their roots are dry. Fast forward to January 2021. I will include a clip from a houseplant tour just to show you the growth at that point. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Hakuna La Planta. My name is Kevin. This over here is my Anthurium Warocqueanum, also known as the queen Anthurium. Lots of damage here, which is unfortunate. And then this one, I think I touched it too much. There's a lot of like small, like micro damage that you could kind of see, but she's putting out a new leaf, which is fantastic. And yeah, hopefully this one does better than the other two. So my experience is limited, like growing this plant in LECA, because soon after that video, I, wanted to know, early 2021 is when people were getting into Lucius of Pond. I want to try it. And so I moved her into Lucius of Pond. This is when things took a downturn, it's downturn, right? I forgot to mention also that when this queen Anthurium was in LECA, she did grow really fast. The nutrient solution that I was giving was my usual general Hydroponics 3-part series with a few additives. I have it on the side over here, I think. And I wasn't using Hydroguard at the time. It was just CaliMagic, FloraMicro, FloraGro, FloraBloom, Diamond Nectar, and RapidStart. I would change the reservoir every 2 weeks at the time with a fresh batch. I found growing this plant in a small little planter in LECA, I found when the roots grew out of the net pot into the reservoir and sat in the reservoir, you saw the yellowing in the foliage. Again, I was new to Anthuriums, and 99.95% of people were like, oh, it's humidity. It's humidity. And this was, 2020, 2021, like everyone was so set on just giving that answer. And it wasn't that. It was because the roots were sitting in the reservoir. Through growing velvet leaf Anthuriums, you can really see it in the foliage when the roots do sit in there for too long. And in my experience, they tend to like melt away or rot if they're sitting there for too long. And let me know if that's a thing. Like, it's different if they grow out of the net pot, there's a cash po, and the roots are not sitting in the reservoir, but they're out. Like, that's still okay if it's humid enough around that spot. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking when the roots like grow into the nutrient solution, they sit there. Anyhow, wow. So I transferred this plant into Lishisa Pond, I think February 2021. And the first mistake that I had was putting it in a closed system. So there is no way in the planter that you're going to see in a moment, there is no way to flush that, to drain what is already in the reservoir in that planter. And I would never do that ever, ever, ever again. I would always, you know, moving forward, have some sort of method to drain the reservoir. So I can always either flush or give it a new set of nutrients. Here she is, guys. So this is the new leaf here. Oh, I'm just so happy. So this is the oldest leaf. You could see the crispinesses and, you know, the yellowing. This leaf was the next one. And then this one here showing signs of it. Honestly, I don't necessarily know the reason. We'll just see. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna experiment because I don't want to blame it right away on one thing. I like to have, I guess, hypotheses. I'm just gonna see what happens. So she was essentially kept in that configuration. I did pot her into, weirdly, the pot that she's in now. So wow, that was like summer 2021. Oh my God, 2.5 years in this planter? That's wild. Anyhow, this one has like a little stopper at the bottom so you could take it out. You know, you have the ability to now empty the reservoir, so that was good. And so fast forward to December of 2021, I was having such a hard time with this plant. And it was because of all the things that I was saying. Not being able to flush the substrate because it was a closed system. At that time, I was so set on not flushing a lot of my plants and substrates. I am known for having the controversial opinion when it comes to flushing, and that it's not like a critical thing for most plants. Keyword, most plants. I now know how pond behaves, and when it's in pond, you do need to flush it a bunch. But at the time, I wasn't doing that. At the time, I was like, no. Over-fertilizing just out of curiosity. And so when you fertilize a plant and the salts sit in the pond or whatever substrate you have, like it does affect it. Like there is a point that it's gonna affect the plant and it'll show. So ultimately, I'm saying all this just because the next clip, you're gonna be shocked at how horrendous this looks. Actually really sad about this one. There's a lot of contributing factors when it comes to this plant and why it's doing poorly. I ultimately thought that it was because of, you know, the use of tap water. Initially, she was doing fine. The biggest downfall here, okay, so we have number one, put it into a closed system, so I was not able to flush out the medium, and therefore there was definitely an accumulation of like, just a lot of bad stuff. I can't think of the word. Then in the summer, I like had an accident. I poked a hole in her, and then it was this whole cycle of me forgetting to fill up the reservoir. It was drying out so much, and yeah, I guess I'll just grab her. Okay, so this is my Anthurium Warocqueanum. So let's just look at this leaf. Oh my gosh. Look at the damage. Oh my gosh. And the hole. Also, can you hear the crispinesses over here? Do you hear it? Okay, that piece just came right off. And this is the newest leaf. And I know she looks, you could see a lot of imperfections. Like over there, there's another hole. I don't know what happened here. And yeah, she is like not perfect. She does look more yellow in person than she does on camera. And I mean, I think I'm just upset because this plant has so much potential. Like, look at this leaf. It is huge. Yeah, I don't know. I think the oldest leaf is this one. So she's having a situation here. And again, I don't think it's humidity related. I truly, truly, truly believe that it's because I'm unable to, well, I technically can, but I haven't. I technically could take the stopper out. You guys agree? Do you think this is definitely a tap water slash maybe overwatering situation? Maybe the roots, because Anthurium roots are so large and in charge, but they are probably in the reservoir. I kind of want to chop her. So yeah, that was her. The reason why the plant looked that way was not because of humidity. It was because of over-fertilization. It was because knowing pond and knowing how it holds onto the salts a lot more than LECA, a lot more than aerated mixes, and me not flushing it ever and like feeding it too often. Like I want to say it was every 2 to 3 weeks I was feeding it. When you're overfeeding and you're not getting rid of that, afterwards. It sits there and like the roots won't be happy, the foliage won't be happy. Moving on to May of last year. I did an Anthurium collection video. She's still not looking great. And at this point, I'm still not flushing the substrate. She's not doing well. Boy, look at this. Oh my God, you could hear it. Do you hear it? So crispy. The newest leaf looked so bad. And you could feel also, she's going to have lots of holes. And I'm pretty sure I'm gonna propagate her. I think that's gonna be a thing, guys. And this one has been very challenging for me. This next clip is from December 2022, and this was the turning point. This was the turning point. It's been a year, but at this point I was thinking about propagating this plant just because she wasn't like happy. I'm so happy I didn't. Just because also the stem, you know, it pushed out all those leaves and they died off. So you had this like huge stem. And so what I was thinking, like I really had the thought that the root system may have like not been the greatest. So I was thinking by putting a collar around and adding more pon, you cover, you know, those adventitious roots, those aerial roots, and those will essentially root into the substrate and build that big healthy root system. Okay guys, we're gonna try something. It might not work, but again, I just want to try it. I have my queen. Look at how beautiful. I know the holes. This one is the one with all of the holes, but come on guys. She is so big. She is so big. Okay, I need to make this a resolution where I really prioritize taking care of this plant because she really deserves better. Okay guys, guys, look at this. I just want to water her through just so, you know, the top part is a bit moist. Okay, I'm just taking the stopper out. I'm gonna have to carry this a lot, eh? Okay. This is actually crazy, guys. I don't even know what I was thinking. It is extremely heavy now. Like, I thought because, okay, see, I'm letting it drain. And so basically when it stops, it means the reservoir is up to here. Okay, well, I do have to say, although it looks weird, you know, I'm glad that the water didn't leak anywhere. I hope y'all will stick with me in my journey with this situation. He's gonna get taller. I'm gonna have to cover more nodes. We'll just cross that bridge when we get there. I now was forced to, you know, every time I would water this plant, I was forced to go to a sink to flush the plant. I wouldn't do it that often. I would do it like once a month. And the reason for that, I don't know if y'all can see here. Okay, so usually come and zoom in. This is where the top of the planter is. You can see that I've kept this Christmas tree collar here. Even though pon is so good at holding onto water, wicking up moisture, gravity is still working against you. Also, if the plant's roots are taking over, they might uptake the moisture at the bottom of the reservoir first before they reach the top here. So knowing that I wanted this top section to root, I needed to keep it moist. And so I always had to water through the top of the cone just to introduce that moisture to the top portion. Because you can see this top part is as tall as this bottom part here. But yeah, it essentially, I was forced at that point to just flush this plant when I would water it. The very first leaf, I think it was around June of this year. First one in pon that didn't have damage on it. So because I saw this leaf early on when she was unfurling, I sprayed this leaf just constantly. Every single day with this pump. Oh my God, this pump here. It's a pressurized pump every day because what I was saying about like the salts or toxins or whatever. Now at this point, I was again being forced to flush the substrate over the sink about once a month. I was pulling back on my feeding. So I was only doing it about once a month and also using a diluted nutrient solution. So the nutrient solution I showed you before, when she was living in LECA, I would just add 1 part water to 1 part nutrient solution. And so I think I lost the point, but because I wasn't fertilizing as much and because I was now flushing, I was getting rid of all those salts in the substrate, but also by spraying down the leaf, you get rid of like the waste products that the plant produces when it can't recycle it for other uses. There's a lot of mechanisms at work. And so by the release on like a sensitive like velvet leaf Anthurium, the release of those on the leaf surface, if it's not taken off the leaf surface like right away, like that's when you see the weakening in the cell walls and essentially the holes, the yellowing, all that stuff you saw before. The leaf is still here. She looks crisp central, but here is that leaf. So she is crispy. This is very normal to see if it's the oldest leaf. Again, another thing that is happening when you see this with older foliage, the plant utilizing mobile nutrients from older growth when it can't access it from the plant's roots. And so this is completely normal to see, but I just want to show you that she is still here. So it was June, right? And now it's December. So I guess 6 months, but not as aesthetically pretty, but I still love her. Like this again was the first leaf that wasn't damaged. So that's what I did with this leaf. This one that has been the star of the show. You know, I kind of want to see, because I just thought to myself, okay, Kevin, you are flushing the plant now. Like you're getting rid of all the nasty stuff in the substrate frequently. Let's see if you just don't spray the leaf every single day, because it was a lot. Let's see what the leaf will look like if you don't spray it down every single day. So when I saw this leaf, I was just making sure to do my flushes. I wasn't overfeeding. I was still doing a diluted nutrient solution every month, flushing the substrate every month, and I sprayed it once compared to, I don't know, like every day until it hardened off. Like that is the difference between that leaf and this leaf. Seeing this leaf and it not being damaged kind of tells me that I'm doing the right thing when it comes to flushing the substrate, because again, looking at the previous clips and like just going based on what I told you about not flushing it for like a year plus, finally adding the cone and like being forced to flush this plant and then getting these results, like that's kind of like really good evidence, because you know, the environment hasn't changed at all. And so that's kind of the journey. I forgot to mention I also added a moss pole here. I don't know if y'all can see right over here. There are roots that are growing outside the moss pole, which I think is hilarious. I just broke it. Wow. Okay, well, and okay, so maybe I'll talk about like what I'm doing now when it comes to the amount of light, pattern, and routine with this plant. I mean, I said in December of last year, I was like, I need to make this plant a priority. Do y'all remember? I said that. That's crazy, and I did. And I mean, it shows. I think it does show. Okay, so lighting. I forgot to mention this as well. When, you know, in the beginning of the journey, you know, I was from the very beginning a firm believer of light. Grow lights are different. Like, they're so different from one another. Just having these grow lights for like 3-4 years now, I know that Anthurium leaves don't necessarily like it when they're super close. Certain types of philodendrons get really angry if they're super close. And so I do think, you know, during that time of like not flushing the plant, the leaves, they did look a lot lighter. Like it was like kind of like light bleaching that you kind of saw as well. And so now this plant is only relying on the south-facing window. This leaf is, and maybe that's why she's like looking a little questionable. This leaf is just kind of facing here. So I would say medium to bright indirect light, depending on the day. And okay, if we're looking at watering, I use tap water. Again, I live in Toronto, so our tap water is actually pretty good. I have never once ever watered a plant with like distilled water. Like I've never tried it. It's just a hassle in my opinion. So tap water, again, the nutrient solution was diluted in half from what I showed you before every month. And then once a month also flushing the entire substrate. And oh, airflow. I don't talk about this enough, but airflow is also so important. So I do have a fan here. Do you see it? So I have a fan here, always on high, moving like this. You know what I'm talking about. Oscillating, is that what it's called? A vent up here, most of the time it's cold air. A vent up here, same thing. So you kind of have a vent going like this and then the fan. I do think airflow is so important. But yeah, sometimes I walk in here and this leaf is going like this, like it's moving this much because there's so much wind in here. And what are my opinions so far about growing this plant in Lusciusa Pond? Obviously my experience is limited because I've never grown this plant in arid mix ever, but I just like how pond holds on to water and moisture. Like it is the biggest selling point with Lusciusa Pond. It is a double-edged sword because of what I was saying about the salts, because Lusciusa Pond, it holds on to a lot of the good, but it holds on to a lot of the bad, and more so than LECA, more so than arid mix. I believe you shouldn't ever let your Anthuriums dry out completely. Obviously, adding the collar, built that root system. I added a moss pole. I think another reason why this plant has grown this much is because she now has a big root system. She now feels secure in where she is. Plants need to feel super secure in where they are before they're able to push out big foliage. And I need to stress this again. This isn't like a care guide that you need to follow every single thing that I say. You don't need to listen to anything that I say, to be honest. But again, so important. I thought it was so important to include like all of the bad. Again, I mean, you can see like 75% of growing this plant was bad. It was only this year that she's, you know, really, you know, started looking healthier. And I mean, I've made more adjustments and have prioritized this plant the most, probably out of like the majority of my collection. Let's look at one last look. So this was 3 years ago when I first got it. She was living in LECA, and now look at her. I'm just so happy. Growing plants is not only about having these beautiful plants, it's about learning and the experience and just taking what you can from that experience. Like, that's what I did to achieve this. My goal is to get these leaves bigger, much bigger. I am curious to see like what the limit is, and like potentially I might have to repot it. She's continuing to grow. Like, I mean, she's attaching to the moss pole. I'm hoping that's gonna be enough of security for the plant to continue to push out these large leaves. But yeah, I'm truly excited to see the journey, you know, this plant takes, whether it's good or bad. And yes. Okay, y'all, I will see you in the next one.